It's midwinter, and we're going to go try to find ourselves a comfrey plant, so I thought I'd bring my trusty yellow-handled comfrey digging spade and use it like a dowser to try to find a comfrey plant out in the middle of this deep dormancy. Or maybe we should call it a witcher. Here we go. Let's see what we can find. That's yellow dock. That's not what we're looking for. And then here, okay, here's a comfrey plant. This is true comfrey coming up. That's the Symphytum officinale. I can tell it's a true comfrey because the sprouts that are coming up are very pointed like that. Here's a wilted true comfrey leaf that I brought from the greenhouse to try to show a little bit what that's going to look like when it gets bigger. And you can see it's very pointed like that. The Russian comfrey would be more rounded. This is more lance-shaped, this leaf, and it has these wings on the side of the stem that go all the way down to the axil, and that's also characteristic of true comfrey. So let me give it a dig up and we'll see what the root looks like. Come into the side like this, go down deep. That's why a spade is so useful, and then just pry it up like that. Luckily the frost is dissipated significantly, and we can get into that root. And you see what we've got here is a tap root that is branching, a branching tap root, and the cortex is very dark, and that too is characteristic of Symphytum officinale. Let's give it a little wash. Nice warm water. That's nice to have this time of year. And you see it was already splitting. So we got a couple of roots out of it. And there's what it looks like when it's cleaned up a bit. Yeah, there's that dark cortex, and then internally white. And if we rub on that, then we can feel the mucilage, that polysaccharide rich mucilage, which is part of the healing activity of the comfrey plant. So let me sit down here for a second, and we'll start with the fun stuff. Using comfrey, the hundreds of times that I've used comfrey in therapy, there are a couple of instances that really shine out. And one of them was a next door neighbor, got into a car accident and broke most of the bones in his body, and ended up, of course, in traction in the hospital. And he drank 8 ounces of comfrey tincture over the space of 2 weeks, and ended up getting out of the hospital early. And the next time I saw him, he was driving a different truck. Asked him how he felt, and he said he felt really quite good under the circumstances. Some little bit of body soreness still, and need to exercise and work out the kinks, but the comfrey sped his healing process to the point where the doctor mentioned that he recovered 3 times faster than anyone else that in the doctor's experience. Another instance that I can remember, this was personal. I was unloading some galvanized stock fences, and they're very, very sturdy, and they come in 4 foot by 12 foot lengths, and they're very heavy. I had my fingers through a number of them, and I was pulling them out of the truck, and then somebody went to help me and just pulled on one. And it was kind of like a guillotine effect, but it wasn't really sharp. So luckily I didn't lose my finger, but my finger got significantly smashed. I looked over, I was in shock. My finger was throbbing and bleeding and turning blue. And I looked over, and there was a table off to the side, and somebody had been chopping up comfrey roots. So I suddenly remembered, oh, I'm an herbalist. I know what to do in this situation. Using my good hand, I got a couple of rocks from the side and put them on the table, kind of a mano and metate kind of affair. Put a comfrey root on the rock, smashed it up, took the mash and wrapped it all around my finger, and it stopped the bleeding and stopped the pain after a few minutes. That finger did heal quite completely, but I smashed it again yesterday when I was putting some wood into the stove, so it's never really a permanent fix. I think all of us have a lot of good stories about how comfrey has helped us in the past, and the activity of comfrey can be divided into three basic areas. One is cell proliferant. It contains the compound known as allantoin, which speeds the regeneration of tissue when it's applied. It also contains some rosmarinic acid, which is a good antioxidant, and so that's a sort of a sideline advantage of using comfrey. Secondarily, it contains a lot of mucilage, polysaccharide-rich mucilage, which emoliates tissues. It soothes and moistens all the tissues. And so this is very useful in terms of keeping the moisture up in your body. It has a healing effect because it allows the tissue to repair while it's still moist. It keeps things from drying out. And you can use comfrey internally to treat, for instance, gastric ulcers, because it has a coating effect, and it will allow those lesions to close and improve very rapidly. And then finally, the plant has a discutient activity, and that is has to do with the dissolving of necrotic tissue. So not only does it increase the growth rate of healthy tissue, but it helps slough off necrotic tissue. And this is an activity which I discovered on my own, and then in my research I found that the only other reference to comfrey doing this was from Maud Grieve, who also listed it as a discutient. And so I feel once again in harmony with the research of our original modern herbal, the English woman Maud Grieve, who would go out to the garden in her apron and discover the healing qualities of common plants in the British Isles. We can go from that onto the Peralesden alkaloid issue, which has a lot to do with people's fear of comfrey, and it is a catchword that has been promulgated by the establishment to try to caution people against using this healing medicinal herb. Let's see, Peralesden alkaloid, what does it rhyme with? Well, how about earth-destroying asteroid? That would be a good rhyme. How about swollen hemorrhoid? That would be another good rhyme, and something that you could use comfrey on to lessen the problem. But basically, let's look at Peralesden alkaloids a little bit and try to figure out something a reasonable kind of level-headed way of looking at pyrrolidin alkaloids. First of all, they in large quantity PAs, pyrrolidin alkaloids, PAs can be damaging to the liver. They it can cause veno-occlusive disease, which is certainly something that you want to avoid at all costs. Well, first of all, their PAs are rather common in nature, and they're made by a number of different plants, and they end up in dairy products, meat products, honey, obviously herbal extracts. The main plant that contains lots of PAs is not a Symphytum. It's not a comfrey. It's something called Senecio. And so it is a really good idea to avoid using Senecios in herbal medicine. They don't really do much for us. The PAs tend to move around in the plant, and they focus most on new tissues. So if you have new comfrey leaf and you compare the PA content of the fresh new growth comfrey leaf and versus mature comfrey leaf, then you'll find that the mature comfrey leaf contains less PAs than the new growth. So maybe a good idea to use the more mature growth. I've also seen evidence that shows the exact opposite of that. In reality, it doesn't make much difference, because the amount of pyrrolidin alkaloids that are in a comfrey leaf is about 1/100th as much as you find in the comfrey root, which means that the comfrey leaf is relatively safe in terms of internal usage, and the comfrey root is something that maybe you want to think about using externally instead of internally. Okay, some more things about PAs. PAs degrade with heat. Heat degrades PAs. And so typical methods of making herbal products, i.e. tea or hot oil infusion, are going to reduce the amount of PAs that are in the final product anyhow. And so this is just a lucky quirk of herbal wisdom that we reduce the amount of negative constituents in our medicine with standard methods of producing. If you heat the ingredients up to about 120 degrees and keep them there with daily maceration for 2 or 3 days, then you're going to have less PAs in the final product. Also, the PAs are reduced by storage. So if you make, for instance, a herb that is the fresh root sliced up, then dry it, then store it for 6 months, then it's going to have dissipated a lot of its PA content by then anyway. And so you're going to have a relatively safe material. Basically, my hit on it is that pyrrolidin alkaloids are nasty, and we need to use comfrey root, especially comfrey root, as a short-term medicine, not as a long-term tonic type medicine. In other words, we use it for first aid. Use it like it's going out of style for a week. It's certainly not going to hurt you. If you've got pre-existing liver disease or you're pregnant, then don't use it. It just makes sense. So true comfrey is a fertile plant. It makes nice scorpioid inflorescences of these sort of urn-shaped flowers. The type plant is Symphytum officinale, and makes cream-colored flowers. There are several different subspecies. Symphytum officinale var. Patens, which is what this one is, bears dark reddish purple flowers that are really quite showy. It is native to Europe. It's a what we could call temperate hardy plant, zones 3 to 9, and the fertile flowers make seeds, which are obovoid nutlets, black. The mass of 30 seeds is 1 gram, and so there you have the seeds. And these are going to germinate most effectively if you give them 30 days of cold conditioning, stratification, prior to planting in a rich, warm medium. And so that can be accomplished either by putting the seed in moist sand in the refrigerator, 40 degrees Fahrenheit, for 30 days, and then planting in the greenhouse, or you can plant it in a pot or a flat and leave it outdoors during the winter and then bring it into a cold greenhouse for germination. Germination rate is quite high, 90%, if you proceed in that manner. Versus Russian comfrey. Russian comfrey is a hybrid. It is has a wider leaf. It demonstrates hybrid vigor. It gets about twice as big as the true comfrey. True comfrey will achieve 3 pounds of root weight after 2 or 3 years, whereas Russian comfrey will top the scales at 6 pounds in 2 or 3 years. And the Russian comfrey is the hybrid of Symphytum asperimum of Russia, Siberia, and this plant, the Symphytum officinalis. Those two plants hybridized produced Russian comfrey, and there are a lot of different varieties of Russian comfrey, and this book is great. This is Hill's Comfrey. It's a book that will never go out of date and talks all about the original hybrids of comfrey and how this was done. And the reality is that the hybrid comfrey also has more of the pyrrolizidin alkaloids in it, significantly more than our true comfrey. And our true comfrey has less of the echimidine, which is one of the most potentially damaging of the PAs. And so I really like to use the true comfrey for medicine. The plant does well in a rich soil. You can give it as much composted manure as it'll take, as you've got, and it'll just get bigger and brighter and more vigorous. You can give it even some raw manure. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really mind. It'll just continue to grow and prosper. It also likes a bit of shade, and so the comfrey is often used as a companion plant in orchards, and so the orchard trees give it some shade. Meanwhile, these deeply delving roots bring up minerals from subsurface, and trees use those minerals with their feeder roots in order to keep from getting various diseases, blights. So it's a great companion plant. It also breaks up plow sole and hardpan by moving right down through the layers, and you can see we've got a real friable soil here that's occurred right around our comfrey root, and it's also promoting the growth of earthworms. There's an earthworm right there that are going to prosper with the sort of the effluents that come off of the comfrey plant. Everything, all parts of nature are stimulated by the comfrey. So that brings up another aspect of why you would plant comfrey next to another plant, or next to an orchard tree, is because it exudes the allantoin into the soil and creates faster growth for all the plants that are around it. So not only is the allantoin a cell proliferant to human cells and creates health in human cells, but it also works with other plants in nature and encourages faster growth on an ongoing basis. So people talk about comfrey being an invasive plant. Well, it's only humans that are invasive. Plants are just propagating themselves for the benefit of great nature. And so if the plants increase in the orchard, then you'll just get more apples and fruits off of the trees. So it's only good. It's only positive. For the purpose of animal feed and as an additive to compost piles and for making liquid fertilizer, sometimes we just use the Russian comfrey because it grows so very fast and makes so much aerial part that we can cut it back. You know, it starts to flower and it looks so great, and then the next day you see it's all fallen over and it's really not much good anymore. Well, that's an indication that it's time to cut it back, lay the leaves down on the crown, or use the leaves for, you can rub them and give them to goats and sheep, horses, any animal that is ailing. If the goats have the scours, then you give them some rubbed comfrey leaves fresh, and that'll cure the scours. They'll have normal bowel movements the next 2 or 3 days. I was walking in Yunnan and checking out some vegetable fields that were being very carefully produced in Yunnan. It's the western province of China. And I discovered comfrey growing between the fields. It was growing in the ditches in the very moist, open sun situation. And I found that it had white flowers. It's one of the 33 different species of comfrey, this one oriental, Chinese comfrey. And it's so exciting to find a new species in another environment, and it makes a lot of sense to talk to local inhabitants and find out how they use it. So I walked with my interpreter Shulan Hu up to the road, and there was a little lady coming, and she had a great bag of roots on her back, and she had one of these straps going around her forehead, and she was wrinkled and wizened, and I asked Shulan to stop her, and my question was, well, you know, this herb that's growing in the ditches around the fields, what do you use it for? And she says, oh, that's used for feeding pigs. And so we had a little cross-cultural verification of the use of comfrey for feeding domestic stock. The plant has 26% protein in the leaves. It's loaded with protein. And so it makes a very good kind of feed for increasing the weight of domestic stock, especially pigs, actually, which I don't eat any bacon, so it doesn't really cause me any never minds about the feeding to pigs, but other people might really be able to use that. And your pigs will never get the scours. They'll just be happy and healthy and grow really, really big. You'll win the state fair. Then the other part of that is feeding the fresh materials out of the garden to the animal, and then having the animal make manure, and then using the manure to then feed the plants in the garden again. You have these circular kinds of processes occurring on a small land that is just always really great when you can see that happening, because you're not using anything from anywhere else, producing your own feed, your own manure, your own medicine. It's part of a really effective cycle. Can take those leaves, those fresh leaves, and put them in a barrel or in a bucket with some water and stir it up and let it rot and decompose. It starts to smell like manure after 3 or 4 days. Keep stirring it, stirring with the earth in the clockwise direction, and then stop the vortex and move again in the counterclockwise direction. So you have life and dissolution of life, the little microcosm within the bucket or the barrel. And then after several days, you filter that and use that 1 part in 5 with water to water in your nursery plants or any kind of fruit trees, or use it to soak seeds to improve seed germination. These are the tricks of the biodynamic farmer, and that all comes back to Comfrey, Symphytum officinale, a good friend to have. Keep it, hold it close to your heart, and use it for the healing of all. So here's the Russian Comfrey, Symphytum X Uplandicum, and you can see that it has a more rounded leaf, and that there is not really much of a wing on the leaf. It doesn't have a real wide wing on the leaf. It's growing up right in raw cow manure, and so it's very, very happy right now. Actually, it does have a slight amount of yellowness to it, but it's January, so it's been frosted heavily. The plant is extremely frost tolerant. It comes from Siberia, after all, or at least one of its parents does. And it's rather prickly on the back side, and that is also indicative of the parent, because the parent is known as prickly comfrey, Symphytum asperimum, Symphytum asperimum, or they've shortened it to asperum. Taxonomists are always figuring out new ways to say the same thing. So yeah, that's the hybrid comfrey. Looking at the wintertime Russian comfrey, that's the Symphytum X Uplandicum, planted in the orchard. So here we are right next to one of my newer fruit trees here, and this is a good interplant because the comfrey is very deep delving in its root system. It breaks up the subsoil, it brings up nutrients and minerals from deep down in the earth, and then in the winter it dies back, and the leaves are loaded with protein, as you know, as well as the allantoin. And when protein-rich leaves die back, then that makes nitrogen. So that feeds the feeder roots of the tree, as well as providing some minerals, and those minerals are going to help the trees be free of disease. So let's dig down inside here a little bit and show you a little bit what the substrate looks like. Here we are, kind of delving down through the leaves that have died back, and we're going to be showing the crown of the Russian comfrey, and just how, there's a walnut, just how much nutrient dissemination there is at the ground surface level. So let's look at what this soil is like here. So the soil is very loose, friable. It frosted last night, and yet it's broken up. It's unfrosted underneath the leaves, and those are the shoots of the comfrey plant coming back again, the nascent shoots, and those will open up significantly and get wider because this is the Russian type as soon as they get a little bit more advanced. So we'll nestle that back down there again. It's a natural mulch for the surface of the soil, and a very good idea to have these plants in your orchard. The subtitle of this conference is Stop the Fear, and when I first saw that I thought, oh, what an appropriate title. As a society, we're really suffering from the malaise of disease, and a lot of people are down, and a lot of people are fearful about different kinds of things that might happen, like global warming and the health of the Mother Earth and this kind of thing, and it really affects people's ability to function normally and affects their creative abilities and so forth. So I thought, well, what a great thing to talk about. And then I realized, oh, no, we're talking about stop the fear of paralysis and alkaloids. Well, I've already addressed that. The comfrey used in a level-headed manner by someone who knows what they're doing is not going to cause any problems to somebody who's got a normal liver. That's just a microcosm of the way herbs work anyway. What's coming up to me is kind of a silly example, but during the beginning of the crisis a couple of years ago, people were running out of toilet paper, and so we recommended that mullein leaves could be used for toilet paper, and then somebody got back to us and said, oh, I tried that and it was really uncomfortable. It was really pokey, and you guys don't know what you're talking about. You haven't tried it yourself. And I'm like, no, I've tried it. I've found it to be quite comfortable. And then I realized that mullein has a nap to the leaf. And so if you wipe in one direction, then it's no problem. There's no prickliness. But if you use it inappropriately and you go the other way around and wipe, then it can cause great discomfort. And so this is typical to herbs in general. If you use them correctly, they're going to be they're going to do what they're supposed to do and not cause any side effects. Whereas if you use them incorrectly, then they may cause harm instead of promoting the good. So in a wider sense, just speaking about the stop the fear thing, I did have a couple of little things to say. One is, fear comes from memory. It comes from worry about the past. And the past really is just a memory. It can't really do anything to you. The present is really all we have. So it makes sense to approach the present with a positive outlook and do little good things, because when you do little good things, then the benefits of that accrue over time. Like, for instance, say you had 3 cords of wood dumped in your house in the front yard, and it just seems so overwhelming that you had to pick up all these pieces of wood and move them into the woodshed. But if you just picked up 5 or 6 pieces of wood every day, then it would be not a whole lot of work. And after 2 or 3 months, then the effort would have come to fruition, and all the wood would be in the woodshed without any real trouble. So I don't know why this is coming up for me right now, but a book called Gulliver's Travels, and Gulliver got thrown out on a shipwreck and ended up crawling out of the ocean and lying down on a beach and on his back, and then when he woke up in the morning he couldn't move because the Lilliputians had come and tied down all the strands of his hair with what to them were large ropes, but to Gulliver they seemed like threads and stakes, and tied down his hands and his legs and completely trussed him up, and he couldn't move. So that's kind of like the way our worries are. When we worry about things, then it causes us to become immobile, tied down by all these multiple little stakes of memory that really cannot hurt us unless they occupy our mind and our being in such a way that there's no room for the goodness to blossom forth. Another little aspect of that book that I remember is about perspective. So Gulliver was looking at the Lilliputian ladies, and he thought, oh, they have such fine skin. They have such exquisite complexions. And the Lilliputian ladies were looking at Gulliver, this massive thing, and they were completely grossed out. The open pores, the sweat, the hair follicles, everything seemed so grotesque to them. So it's all a question of perspective. We can look at the world, and we can look at each other, and we can see the beauty, and we can act in a way that nourishes that beauty, the goodness of human, plant, animal, and the interaction of Mother Nature. So we proceed in that way, and we mind our own business and get the good things done. Peace.